Today, we are continuing our discussion on character descriptions by focusing on what you shouldn't do. Character descriptions are a minefield of overdone cliches, telly writing, and vexing adjectives. Poorly written descriptions will pull the reader out of the story, make it hard to visualize your characters, and overall just detract from your writing. In the last video, I went over some of the things that you should do when describing characters. Now it's time to share 5 don'ts when it comes to writing character descriptions. Wait, if the last video was stuff you should do, then this video is stuff you shouldn't do. So it doesn't make sense for these to be don't. Never mind. Thing to not do number 1. Don't rely just on physical attributes. The problems with these types of descriptions is that they lack substance or interest. It can seem like a cold list of specifications rather than a thorough description of an actual person. You can also run the risk of being repetitive. If every one of your descriptions just rattles off eye color, height, build, hair color, etc., then it will be hard to distinguish one character from another. You want your descriptions to be very sensory, to convey more than just details about a character that might be entered into a form. You want the reader to be able to infer things about the character, either positive or negative, based on how they're described. Go deeper than the surface level facts. Think about how a person's appearance would affect others at an emotional level. Don't just describe a character as tall, but describe how they might be imposing or intimidating. A character might be beautiful, but are they beautiful in a way that makes people jealous or intimidates people? Don't just describe the shape, size, and color of your characters. Describe them in a way that will evoke emotions in the reader. But be careful not to overuse adjectives or rely too heavily on cliches. Thing to not do number 2. Don't rely too heavily on adjectives or cliches. I think I said that already. The literary world is full of overdone cliches related to physical descriptions of characters. Another common problem is adjectives. A character who is frowning angrily or smiling nervously is usually not a character that's described goodly. Instead of relying on cliched descriptions and adjectives to describe the emotional posture of a character, focus on character actions and sensory details to get these details across. Rather than describing a character's expression as nervous, maybe have them drum their fingers on the table or stammer when they speak. Instead of describing a character as calm and unflappable, maybe describe their relaxed posture or how they're the only one not sweating in a hot room. Remember that it's almost always better to show rather than tell. Although the above advice kind of showed that, so maybe I didn't need to tell you that. Thing to not do number 3, don't be repetitive. You don't want to repeat yourself. Avoid saying the same thing over and over again. The next thing that you say shouldn't just be rehashing what you've just said. This kind of gets back to the whole going beyond the physical thing, but you want to make sure that all of your character descriptions are distinctive. You absolutely want to avoid going through the same elements in the same order every time you introduce a character, but also make sure you aren't using the same metaphors or reusing the same expressions or having a character do the same thing all the time to indicate a certain attribute. If the bad guys are always the ones smoking, or every character who's supposed to be beautiful has the same hair color, or everyone who's nervous has the same sort of tic, then that can be a problem. Repetitive writing, unless done for dramatic or literary effect, is almost never a good thing. If every one of your descriptions feels the same, then every one of your characters is going to feel the same. Thing to not do number 4, don't be too specific, or not specific enough. Okay, that statement is completely contradictory. There are times when being specific and concrete in your descriptions can serve you well. Adding detail and depth to a description often means being more specific. Yes, his eyes were green and he had a scar on his face, but what shade of green and what shape was the scar? These are the kinds of details that will help to ground the reader and really immerse them in the story. Of course, being a little less forthcoming with information can also serve you well. Leaning into metaphorical language can be an interesting way to describe characters. You can convey a lot of information about who a character is, how they carry themselves, and even how they look by using more abstract language. If a character enters a room like the dawn breaking over the horizon, or takes on every hardship like a blacksmith's anvil takes on every hammer blow, then the reader is probably able to fill in a lot of information about that character, even though we haven't described much in a very concrete way. Sometimes it's best to let the reader fill in the details, ideally when the time is right. Thing to not do number 5, don't describe a character at the wrong time. Obviously, if a character hasn't appeared in the book yet, you're generally not going to describe them to the reader, unless their name is Gatsby, maybe. There are exceptions, of course, but usually that's the case. This doesn't mean that the first time this character appears in the story, that the story should grind to a halt to describe them in full detail. Character descriptions are best doled out as they are relevant to the events of the story, or as they are noticed by the viewpoint character. You might not notice right away that a character laughs nervously every time another character is mentioned, or you might not learn of their disgust for authority until they light up a cigarette inside a bar in flagrant disregard for local ordinances. Revealing these details at the appropriate time will make the description feel more natural. It won't feel like the story is being dragged to a stop to tell us what color a character's eyes are. It also ensures that the reader is more interested and engaged with the description because it's always relevant to what's going on in the story. I mentioned in the last video about describing relevant details of your character, things that affect the story or would likely be noticed by another character. There is also a time dimension to this as well, since what is relevant depends on what's happening at that time in the story. Just like there's a time component to you watching this video, in that it took you some time, and I'm very glad you decided to take that time. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday and occasionally on Friday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.